appreciate this. I specialize in Groovy and Grails, two technologies that if you're a Java developer should be very interesting to you. My company, thirstyhead.com, focuses on training, focuses on advocacy work, and certainly focuses on writing books and writing articles. There are a number of free resources for you. If you go to IBM Developer Works, I write 2 series of articles, Practically Groovy and Mastering Grails. They're both entirely free. You can go and visit these websites and get more information. My latest book, Getting Started with Grails, is also a free download, a 160-page PDF that you can download and read for free. So there are lots of good resources for you. I say this because I'm going to be giving Groovy and Grails talks tomorrow. This is not a coding talk. This is a big thoughts talk. We're going to go in and deconstruct Web 2.0 as the title implies, but we're going to talk about it from a conceptual level rather than a curly braces and semicolons level. Is that okay? You can still leave if you'd like. You won't hurt my feelings at all. But this will be more of a thinking talk than a coding talk. So Web 2.0, of course, is a phrase that's been bandied around for several years now. Some people feel that it will save us all, that it's a panacea, that it is the greatest possible technological advance ever. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. By the same token, though, I don't think that Web 2.0 is a lipstick on pig. Does that metaphor translate well? Yeah, it's absurd, isn't it? Yes. That if you look at Web 2.0 and say, oh, it's all just rounded corners and pastel colors, and you can easily dismiss that. So I'm hoping that this talk will be neither ironic or sarcastic. We will have some fun at the expense of some popular websites. But more than anything else, I'd like to try to strike a healthy balance between enthusiasm for what Web 2.0 has to offer and not get caught up in the hype and try to oversell the concept. So I'm hoping to walk a fairly middle ground between those two extremes. So to get things started, let's dismiss these superficial or cosmetic aspects of 2.0, Web 2.0, out of hand. Now, these are exciting new things, those pastel colors, those rounded corners, those shiny new aspects of Web 2.0. I don't want to dismiss them completely because part of what it's been doing, this Web 2.0 revolution, has been making the web truly beautiful. And that is important. How many of you here are programmers? Raise your hands. Yes. How many of you here are graphic designers? Uh-huh. Yeah, I see that. I'm a programmer as well, so I know the kind of websites that you write. They look like my websites. They're very ugly. They're very ugly. But part of what we can do in this Web 2.0 excitement and hype is to focus on making our websites more beautiful. The aesthetics of the web makes this a very exciting time as well. We remember what the old web used to look like, didn't we? A white background with blue hyperlinks. And that was wonderful 10, 15 years ago. But we can certainly do more to make our websites look beautiful. One of the things we can do is you can go to a number of places. If you don't consider yourself a CSS developer, if you don't consider yourself a graphic designer, this is a wonderful website, free Css Templates.org. Can you tell by the URL what this website offers? Hundreds upon hundreds of free CSS templates. They are Creative Commons licensed, so you can go and you can download them, you can incorporate them into their website. They're business friendly, but more importantly, they're a way that you can begin learning how these technologies work together. You can download them and look at them and then begin tweaking them and arranging them on your own. It's a wonderful website that I use quite a bit as well, freeCSSTemplates.org. Another aspect of Web 2.0 are these rounded corners. I don't know what it is. I'm a programmer, as I said. I don't know why everyone is so excited about rounded corners, but certainly they are. In HTML5 and CSS3, rounded corners will be native. You will be able to say, do you see this div over here? Make those corners rounded, and poof, it'll be Web 2.0 compliant. In the meantime, you can use very lightweight libraries like this, curvy corners, that allow you to do the same thing programmatically in JavaScript. What's nice is that as these new technologies come forward, there are always shiv technologies or shim technologies that kind of pave the way. And this is one library. There are a number of libraries out there, but this is one library that makes it easy to get those kinds of things available to you right here, right now. And of course, all kinds of free badges, free banners, free things like this. This one is a website, web20badges.com. There are a number of these things out there, but I bring these to you as a fellow developer saying I'm not going to spend the time to write my own CSS templates, but I will go to freecsstemplates.org and download them. I'm not going to spend the time in Photoshop building my own badges, but I will find free resources out there that will allow me to make my websites more beautiful. If you look at my websites, you have a hard time believing that a programmer did something like that. But this ends the superficial aspect of my talk. Now we can get into the big thoughts aspect of this. Because Web 2.0 is certainly more than rounded corners and pastel colors and pretty badges. It really does require you to think differently about the way we do web development. And what's interesting about it is that the Web 2.0 moniker is kind of cheeky, isn't it? It's ironic. Because it's not one technology, it's not a change of technologies. It's the same technology that we have today, HTML and CSS and JavaScript. But it's these technologies used in a slightly different way. And that's why it's a different way of approaching the same problems. Do any of you recognize this gentleman? Tim O'Reilly, very good, yes. The founder of O'Reilly Publishing. He's the one that coined this phrase, Web 2.0. And if you want to read more about it, he posted a blog. If you Google for Tim O'Reilly Web 2.0, this will be one of the very first hits you see. I know the dates are very small, I apologize, but he wrote this back in 2005. So here we are almost 5 years later, and we're still kind of figuring out what this Web 2.0 revolution means. But what he did with his folks in his company is they sat down and they said, here is what Web 1.0 was, and here's what Web 2.0 means. Now, this is a very long article. It goes on and on. Just to pick some of the high-level summaries. He says, Web 1.0 was a very Britannica Online kind of web, a formal encyclopedia written by professionals, highly paid professionals. Yeah? How many of you ever visited Britannica Online? A few hands, but not many, right? Some people think maybe it was the cost. Some people said, well, I couldn't find the article that I was looking for. There are lots of things. Then we looked at Wikipedia. How many of you have been to Wikipedia? Absolutely. Now, you might think that it's just because it's free, and that helps. But it's also because there is so much information. If you are one of 12 people that is interested in a certain topic, this is where you and your 11 best friends in the world can gather and write as much as you would like about that one topic. I love going to Wikipedia. After I go see a movie, I go to Wikipedia. After I find out about a new technology, I go to Wikipedia. After I find an author that I love, I go to Wikipedia. So you can see that just in that one example, that's what we're talking about in terms of Web 2.0. It's the same HTML and CSS and JavaScript that Britannica used, but it's entirely different in its execution. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there are a couple of other things that Tim O'Reilly talked about in this seminal blog entry, trying to define Web 2.0. It is a nebulous term, isn't it? We're software engineers. We like saying that this is a specification. But in fact, no. He says that Web 2.0 involves a different way of looking at things. He says that in Web 2.0, we're focused now on services, not software. What did he mean by that? Well, this is a Web 1.0 darling, certainly, Netscape. We think of them, oh yes, they're a software company. They wrote that browser, didn't they? They tried charging us for the browser, and then Internet Explorer came out, and they said, okay, well, we can't charge for the browser. And then they tried charging for the server, the web server, yes. And then Apache web server came out for free. Okay, we can't charge for the server. Yes. The web started out that way. The web started out as a very passive medium. You would read web pages. You have to go out of your way to give people the ability to add comments. You have to go out of your way to allow people to rate your products. You have to go out of your way to build, to architect a website that says people who bought this also bought that, and you might like this other thing as well. But if you architect your websites for participation, they'll be wildly successful. Because really, we're hunters and gatherers at heart. Even though this is a modern technology, when we look at some of these websites, like Dig, like Delicious, are you writing your own news articles and submitting them to Dig? No. You're saying, hey, I found this article, you might find it interesting as well. Hey, I've been researching this crazy new JSON stuff, JavaScript object notation. Here are all my hyperlinks. You might be interested in those hyperlinks to that resource as well. You can see how we're fostering this collaboration through these kinds of websites. This is one of my favorite blogs. The blog of unnecessary quotes. Yes, very sarcastic. You know, when they say, welcome, friends of the garden, you know, are they really friends? I don't know. But what's interesting about this website is this isn't one person gathering pictures of these unnecessary quotes. This is all of us submitting these pictures to a common location. Have you been to this website? Don't raise your hand. I won't ask you to incriminate yourself. It's called I Can Has Cheeseburger. It is nothing more than pictures with misspelled captions over them. But if you visit it once, you will lose hours to it. You will be there because you will find one after the next, after the next, after the next. This is a cute picture of a kitty that says, I Can Has Cheeseburger. But look at this. How many people have rated this? 6,282 people have rated this picture. 6,000 people had something to say about this picture. Unbelievable how interactive this picture is. 518 people left comments about this picture. Really? But what we find is this website allows us to dig it and read it and stumble upon it and Facebook it and MySpace it and everything else. We begin seeing now this collaborative, interactive, dynamic all kind of come together. When we go and visit YouTube 20 years from now, we'll forget that it introduced movies to the internet. The fact that it's moving pictures is not really the interesting thing about YouTube, any more than selling books is the interesting thing about Amazon. If we look at this in terms of collaboration, you'll see that we can not only watch a movie, but we can rate it. We can share it with friends. We can add it to a playlist. We can flag it as inappropriate. We can email it. We can subscribe to it. Right? This website is all about the collaboration. It's not just me posting my video up there, in this case of Lego Star Wars. Yeah, and that's not mine, by the way. I have an 8-year-old son who loves Legos and loves Star Wars. What would be better than having them both together? Yeah? But what we find is this collaborative nature of YouTube is what makes it so deeply interesting. As software developers, Git and GitHub brings this same collaborative idea. We're not uploading pictures of Lego Star Wars anymore. We're uploading source code. But what makes Git so different than Subversion or CVS or anything else is that it's actually inverting the pyramid once again. It is a peer-to-peer source control system. And as more and more open source projects move to Git, they find the participation in those projects goes way up because everyone has their own copy of it. And Git gives us the tools to begin merging those things. You get worried saying, well, wait a second, does that mean anyone can commit changes to my version of this? No, not at all. But what that means is we have all of these independent versions out there. And if I'm the owner of the project, I can cherry pick, I want your changes, and your changes, and your changes. And we see GitHub is fundamentally premised on the idea of this collaborative source control. Counterintuitive, isn't it? Yeah. Akamai. We know what Akamai is, don't we? Yeah? So talking about YouTube, anytime we have these big, large binary nuts that we're trying to pass around, Akamai is a way to share these things. But Akamai is a great service, but it's very expensive. It clusters at the head. It's a victim of its own success perpetually. The more people use it, the more service degrades, and so they have to add more hardware to it. They're constantly chasing their own success. How many of you in here use Bittorrent? How many of you use it for something legal? Really? You can use it for legal things as well? Oh, of course, yes. You can download Linux distros. You can download these kinds of things. What's interesting about Bittorrent is that it is Akamai on its head. It's peer-to-peer clustering. It can never be a victim of its own success. You are simultaneously a client and a server. So the more popular a download is, the more servers there are out there. If it's less popular, less servers. Interesting ways to look at this collaborative nature of Web 2.0. The last thing we'll talk about here is how Web 2.0 is componentized. And by componentized, I mean web services. This is a wonderful book, by the way, by David Weinberger, Small Pieces Loosely Joined. And he was really just talking about the web. He says, no, wait a second, we can have an HTML page. Yes. That pulls down an image from this server. Yes. That pulls down JavaScript from this server. Yes. And CSS from this server. Yes. And a movie from this server. Yes. And an MP3 from this server. Yes. And it's legal? Yes. That is the web. The web is nothing more than small pieces loosely joined. And so when we think about web services, why do we immediately think of SOAP? How many of you do SOAP development in here? Some? Okay. I wouldn't raise my hand either, right? Yeah. What we find is that SOAP was one implementation of web services, not the only one out there. The founder of web services, he was sitting at the table with Microsoft and IBM when these other people put these things together. Dave Weiner is his name. He says, hey, I love SOAP. But what we have to realize, this is the creator of SOAP, he says that, I think SOAP is a failure. Really? Yeah, he says, certainly we all understand what SOAP is, but my vision, this is David Weiner here, my vision of SOAP was that it was going to be a great equalizer. Kind of like HTTP that faded off into the woodwork. Everyone uses it, it's ubiquitous and invisible at the same time. Would that be how you describe SOAP? No, me neither. So what we find is there are a whole new set of web services. Tim O'Reilly, once again, talking about RESTful web services. These are real numbers that Amazon has both SOAP-based web services and RESTful web services. And nearly 9 out of 10 developers choose the RESTful interface over the SOAP interface. Not because the REST has more features, but because it is a simpler solution to the problem. This is Tim O'Reilly speaking again. He says, despite all the corporate hype, and that may be too strong, despite every opportunity, we all know what SOAP stands for. We've all read articles about SOAP in magazines and books. He says, despite every opportunity, we find that developers like that simpler, grassroots approach to small pieces loosely joined. Google has officially deprecated their SOAP-based web services. They did it back in December of 2006. They've converted all of their web services over to RESTful web services, specifically RSS and Atom-based web services, getting to the syndication idea we talked about earlier. If you go to programmableweb.com, they keep track of all of the different APIs out there, all of the major Web 2.0 players. And these are real numbers once again. 71% of the Web 2.0 darlings out there are offering RESTful web services, not SOAP-based web services. So, when we're going to build a website now, are you going to write your own credit card validation? Are you going to write your own mapping interface? Are you going to write your own embedded video player? Of course not. These are all web services, but not SOAP-based web services. These are Web 2.0 services, small pieces, loosely joined. To summarize, Web 2.0 means a lot of things. It's certainly the cosmetic aspects of it. We don't want to dismiss these cosmetic aspects. A prettier web is a good thing, yes. But more so than the cosmetic aspects, Tim O'Reilly says that Web 2.0 is about service, not software. It's about data, not hardware. And I say that Web 2.0 is a dynamic, interactive, collaborative, componentized ecosystem. Did you enjoy yourself? I did. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions, or did I run us right up to the very end? One or two questions? Yes. I'm sorry, what would I do if I was not a programmer, what would I do? I don't know, maybe I'd be a shepherd. No, I'm an author. I enjoy presenting. I enjoy talking about these things. I enjoy the semicolons and the curly braces. But I think we spend far less time as programmers focusing on the aesthetics and the real joy of being a programmer. So my dad worked for IBM for years. I grew up with a computer in my house. I don't know if I could have done anything else but doing what I'm doing right now. But certainly taking joy in what we do is very important. Yes, one more question.
There's talk going around that with the coming up of 2.2, the time for development has rapidly increased because the demands are, the requirements are demanding. Is that a myth or is it true? The development time overall has increased because people want all the vague ways possible to access data.
So it's a very good question. You know, has development time increased or decreased? You saw how quickly it took me to build up a new Grails application like that. I would say that rather than, you understand the metaphor, oh, they moved the goalposts on us? I would say that they didn't move the goalpost. The goalpost is still to get a website up there and running. But things like Grails actually moves the starting line. And so what that means is I still spend the same amount of time building a website, but since I'm able to do so much of the simple, mundane things, the CRUD applications, it builds out the testing for me and the validation and things like that, that I can spend my time on the more interesting things, the user experience, the graphic design, those kinds of things. So I would say as a programmer in modern times now, what we are we're more assemblers of small pieces loosely joined. What we need to do as developers is be intimately aware of, okay, well, I'm going to use Flickr for this little bit of this, and PayPal for this bit, and Google Maps for this bit, and be aware of all these different resources, and try to, stand on the shoulders of giants, and reuse the hard work of all these other developers out there. I'm working for a startup right now called Closely.com, and what we are is we're building a website around Twitter and Facebook and a number of these different web services. Our value proposition is not to replace them, but make all those services easier for small businesses to do advertising. And so I think that fits perfectly into your question, is we're not building any of these new things, but we're making it easier for people to use those things. And I think as developers, that's what we should be looking at as well. I'm going to be here for several more days. I give a talk at the very end of the day called Lizard Brain Web Design. I hope to see you there. If not, I'll be talking about Groovy and Grails tomorrow. If not, I'll be talking about JSON and Ajax on Friday. But thank you once again for your time and attention. I really do appreciate it.